Ladies and gentlemen, I'm live. We are live a little bit early, 17 minutes early. I'm JB Taylor. This is Walk Off Sports Talk. It's live reaction Tuesday. I do this every Tuesday. Like last week, I'm bringing you some Mr. Ballen. Mr. Ballen is a terrific storyteller, fantastico at the art of the spook. He is tremendous. This is a reaction stream, Ashton. A reaction stream. We're going to watch some Mr. Ballen. Hey, Mike. We're going to watch some Mr. Ballen. Terrific storyteller. Terrific storyteller. We're going to watch a couple of his videos, 2 or 3. I came on early just to get a couple of, well, not a couple, one video in extra, you know. Almost. I stopped paying attention to them. They pissed me off. I'm gonna check back in next year. Um, no, it wasn't rude, Ashton. It wasn't rude at all. I just felt like they slapped me in the face as a fan with how they treated Alec Thomas. So I'll catch him next year. I'll catch him next year. Yeah, we're gonna watch a little bit of Mr. Ballen. Infinity JB. All right. Top 3 scariest forest stories. Forest stories. This should be interesting. 24 minutes long, so if these longer tales aren't your jam, that's okay. I love reaction videos. I love making them. I love watching them. And if you want to tune in later, maybe skip a little bit, or that's fine too. But I thought I'd share some Mr. Ballen with you. And I might at some point take a recommendation. Last one to do that though had some animal harm in it, and I'm not a fan of that. So if you're going to recommend something, make sure it's good. All right. So without further ado, 15 minutes early. Let's get started. Yes, sir.
Before you skip today's video, just watch the top story. It's called Turn Around. Watch it start to finish so you can see the ending. And then once you've seen the ending, watch it again. It's so creepy.
Can you not hear it? Let me know if they ain't got us stuck with them. Stick with them. I'll catch the scores. They just beyond infuriating. Okay. Having some audio issues apparently. Hold up. Wait a minute. Didn't have this problem last time. I'm not entirely sure what is going on here. So let's try this again.
You know what was actually going on the whole time.
Okay, I understand. Hold up. Is it work? Okay. Oh my goodness. Let's see if it's working.
And they were there. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer to spot the like button on their next set of bench press, and then as soon as they start to fatigue, walk away. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications.
Okay, so you can hear it. For some reason, I can't hear it on my phone because I have the chat up. This is bizarre. I did not have this problem last time. This is bizarre. Oh, I see now. My phone glitched. Okay, perfect. It said I had full volume, but apparently I didn't. Wow. Way to make me look dumb, phone.
So you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Literally turned it all the way up, and I watched it go up. Okay. Oh, it probably looked too loud. Laughter.
In the early 2000s, a teenager named Evan and his father would regularly go hunting in the Georgia backcountry. When Evan turned 14, his father befriended a very wealthy landowner in Georgia who offered them access to one of his best private hunting areas. And just a couple of days later, on October 5th, Eben and his father would take him up on the offer. They woke up super early and they drove out to the edge of this property that was actually fenced in. And they went to a main gate where they had the combo that this guy had given them. They punched in the combo, opened up the gate, drove in, shut the gate, locked it, and then continued down the access road. They followed this road for about 2 miles where it came to a stop right outside of this huge forest. They parked their truck, they got out, they put on their gear, and in the pre-morning darkness began hiking into the woods. Even though they were there primarily to hunt, Eben and his father secretly enjoyed just hiking around the woods and camping out.
Hiking is fun.
If they got to extend their hunting trips, they would, even if the hunting wasn't good. And so since they spent a ton of time in the woods together, they noticed almost immediately when they walked into this particular forest that something was off. There's no birds, there's no animals, silence. It's just totally silent. The only sounds that...
Yeah, right away. If you have experience hiking, if you have experience hunting, that right away should have told them something isn't right. So why continue on?
They heard that were not them was a single plane that passed overhead. Although they found this very odd, they figured, you know what, this is private property, not a lot of people are out here. I'm sure as soon as we showed up, the animals were aware of us and they scattered. They finally make it out to the hunting stand that the owner had told them about. They get all settled in, they're getting ready to see some animals, and all day long, they don't see a single animal, they don't hear a single animal. In fact, again, it is just completely silent. Frustrated, they began packing up their stuff, making their way down off the stand, and they started looking for a place to make camp for the night. And Eben's father suggested, well, hey, there's obviously nothing over here. It's been quiet all day. Why don't we walk deeper into the woods a little ways, set up camp there?
Apologies, guys.
We can better
I'm gonna make myself
this.
tiny.
So they hiked for about an hour farther away from where they parked their truck, and they reached this clearing, which is perfect for setting up their camp. And so they set up their tent, and Eben's father says, hey, we still got some daylight. Do you want to go try our luck and see if we can see some animals out here now? Eben's like, yeah, why not? So they hike a little ways away from their campsite, and they set up their blind, and once again, they don't see any animals. It's totally quiet. And so they turn around and they start heading back. As soon as they could see their campsite, which really was just their tent, they noticed that their tent was now collapsed. And Eben's father turns to him and says, oh, it must have been the wind. And Eben says, no, it couldn't have been the wind, because all day today we have been commenting on how quiet it is and how the fact that there's no weather, no wind, no anything is heightening the fact that it's completely silent. So it could not have been wind. So Eben's father is like, well, when you set the tent up, did you not put the posts into the eyelets? Did you not build it correctly? And Eben's like, no, I've made that tent like 1,000 times. I know it was set up correctly. They walk into their campsite and they look down at their tent and they're really confused at what they see. The 2 rods that go in an X over the top of the tent that thread through nylon loops and then anchor at 4 different points on the base of the tent, well, they had been removed from the 4 corners. And if you know how a tent
I'm out of there.
It works on tension. And once you have a rod anchored in 2 points, it doesn't just pop out. It's anchored at 2 sides. It's actually difficult to remove each anchor. Once one is out, the other comes out easily. But basically, the rod would need to break in order for it to come out of those anchor points, or someone would have to come over and remove it. And they didn't remove them, and none of the rods were broken, which leaves them with either they failed to set up their tent, even though they had distinct and clear memories of setting it up and double checking it was set up. They put gear inside of it, or someone came over to their campsite while they were gone and undid the 4 corners. They decide, you know what, it can't be some stranger coming over here because we're the only ones with the gate combo. This is private property and no one could have been here. And why would they do that if they came to our campsite? Why would they randomly collapse our tent and then vanish? So it had to be us. We must have not made the tent. And while they didn't really believe that they had not made their tent, they convinced themselves that
they gaslit themselves
because the alternative was just too bizarre and frankly terrifying to consider. So they build their tent and they make a little fire and they stay up for a little while chatting before being tired and saying, okay, let's just go to bed. They extinguish the fire, they get in the tent, and they both fall asleep. A couple hours later, Eben wakes up suddenly. He's not sure if he's dreaming or not, but he thinks he hears someone laughing a couple hundred meters behind the tent off in the woods.
No.
Eben instinctively turns to make sure his dad is still in the tent with him, and he is. And then Eben starts listening really intently to what's happening outside. and all he can hear is silence, like it's been since they got in the woods. He doesn't hear any more laughter, and so he says, okay, I must have just been dreaming, and there wasn't any laughter out there, and eventually Eben goes back to sleep. A little while later, Eben wakes up suddenly again, except this time his dad is already awake and looking around anxiously.
Uh-oh.
Eben sits up and goes, what's going on? His dad goes, shh, and he goes, can you hear that? And Eben listens, and to his horror, he hears laughing. He wasn't dreaming before. Eben also realizes the laughter is not coming from the same area. He heard it. It's now coming from the opposite direction, and it's a lot closer to them. Eben very quietly and carefully explains to his dad that he actually heard this laughter a couple hours earlier, and Eben's father turns to Eben and says, before we came out here, I asked the owner, should we expect any other hunters or campers or anybody nearby? And the owner said, this is private property, and it's fenced in. There is no one there but you guys.
Just because it's fenced in doesn't mean you can't get over or through.
Their attention back to just listening, because they're hoping this is just going to stop, and whatever this is just going to leave. But it doesn't leave. They hear footsteps running towards them from way off in the forest, and it's so quiet, it's really easy to hear these footsteps. And whatever this is charging towards them.
Yeah,
damn. To a complete stop right at the edge of their clearing. At this point, Eben is now grabbing onto his father. Eben's father is holding onto his rifle, and he's getting ready to open the tent to confront whatever is out there. And right before he grabs the zipper, this person, whatever it is, starts laughing again, and it's practically right on top of them. So loud. They can hear it clear as day.
Just shoot, man.
Right
just
outside
shoot.
their tent. And Eben's father takes a deep breath. He grabs the zipper, and as soon as he begins moving it, the sound the zipper made causes the laughter to stop. They don't hear footsteps, so they know probably something's still out there. But the laughter stops like it's recognized that they're making noise. They're right there. There they are. They're in the tent. Eben's father freezes with his hand on the zipper, and he's debating whether he should go outside or not. And before he can even make that decision, whatever this thing is turns around and runs back into the woods, and it's just gone. And for several minutes, they just sit like that in total silence, praying that whatever this is gone for good. And after several minutes, when they don't hear anything, there's no more laughing, there's no more running, Eben's father re-zips up the tent, puts his hand back down, and they're both left just sitting there thinking, what the heck just happened? Eben and his father would stay up all night, and they would barely speak, because whatever this thing was had heard them when they moved the zipper. And so they were really afraid of making any sound, even little sounds, because it's so quiet, sound travels really far, and they don't know who or what is out there. And so in silence, holding their guns, they're just waiting for the sun to come up. And as soon as it did, they were up and out of there, literally running out of the forest, checking over their shoulder the whole time, all the way back to their truck.
I bet,
so to this day, they have no idea who or what the heck was running around out there. And they told the owner of the property about it, and the owner just said, it's not possible. We have a totally gated-in private piece of property, and there are cameras watching the only entrance. And you are the only ones that went in or out over that time period. And prior to that, we monitor this property. Nobody else was in there.
Wild. What do you think it was?
In the summer of 2013, a young woman named Katie and her father decided to go camping at one of their favorite campgrounds in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Katie loved going camping with her father because he was this totally accomplished outdoorsman, and he used to be a wilderness guide for much of his life, and so she just always felt like she was in great hands whenever she was out in the wild with him, and she had kind of become a fairly accomplished outdoorswoman herself. When they arrived at the campground, the parking lot was packed with cars, and they're like, shoot, I wish we'd called ahead a couple weeks ago and reserved the site because they're probably not even available now. But they went to the front desk and they were like, you're in luck, we have one available, but it's the one that's way over there. It was this one campsite that was kind of isolated from the rest of the campground. It was far away from the bathhouse, it was far away from where
Black sheep of the cabins.
it was far away from the parking lot.
Or
It was like
campsites.
really inconvenient. And whenever they came camping here, it was like the one site they didn't want to use. But beggars can't be choosers. They were happy to even have a site. And so they drove all the way down this little road into this very isolated campsite, kind of in the middle of this forest. Once they got there, they began setting up their respective tents because they were not going to be staying in the same tent. They each had these very small backpacking tents, which were so small that you could either zip it up all the way and stay warmer and more protected, but you had to sleep in a ball because your legs would not fit otherwise. Or you could unzip the front of your tent, and when you lay down, you could extend your legs fully, but your legs are protruding outside of your tent. So you could only do that in warmer weather and if you were comfortable.
Better your feet than your head.
The wilderness. After they set up their tents and they get their coolers set up and they have all their stuff kind of the way they want it, they go out hiking for the rest of the day. When they come back, they're totally exhausted, they fall asleep, and nothing of note occurs over that first night. The next day they get up, they go back out, they go hiking all day all over again, and they come back that night and they are totally exhausted again. And they get into their tents and they go to bed. This night, something of note would happen. At about 3 a.m., Katie wakes up and she hears footsteps walking towards the campsite from a little ways off. They're in the woods somewhere. And she's thinking, okay, it's got to be my father because he's diabetic and every night he gets up to go to the bathroom maybe 3-4 times. And he probably was just walking to the bathhouse and now he's walking back. But she realizes the bathhouse is over here, not over here. So what is he doing walking towards the campsite from this side? The footsteps come out of the tree line, they come into the clearing that is their campsite, and they stop about 2-3 meters outside of Katie's tent. Now, there were no windows on Katie's backpack tent. There was just a little fence at the front and the back that kind of pointed down, and so she couldn't see out anyways, and there was no illumination out, so you can't even pick up a silhouette. It's just total darkness out there. She can't see who's out there. She can only hear them. But she's thinking, okay, maybe my dad got lost coming back from the bathhouse because he didn't have a flashlight and he walked too far. That's possible. Or, he could have decided to relieve himself just in the tree line, even though he's not known to do that. He's a guy that goes to the bathhouse. And so she's running through these scenarios that are convincing her that, oh, that's just my dad. But what she really wants to hear is that person walk away from her tent and get into her father's tent, because that will confirm in her mind that that was her father. And so she's sitting here waiting for that confirmation, and she hears the footsteps again, but instead of walking around her tent to her father's tent, this person walks right up against her tent very quickly. And they clearly begin leaning over her little tiny tent because she can hear them breathing right above. And this is when she realizes,
not cool.
That's not my dad. And as she's having this terrible revelation that some stranger is outside her tent right now, she has an even worse revelation. It was a warm night that night, so she was sleeping with her tent unzipped and her legs poking out the end. She musters the courage to begin slowly retracting her legs back inside of her tent. But before she's able to do that, the person stands up, turns, and starts walking towards the base of her tent where her legs are. She's completely frozen and terrified about what's about to happen. But this person doesn't stop at her feet. They keep moving and in fact start circling her tent. But because they were making a lot of noise and walking around her, it allowed her to pull her legs back into her tent without, this person hearing her. And so she had the illusion of safety being inside of her tent, but her tent is still unzipped. So she's waiting for this person to come around and crouch down and look inside of her tent because it's open.
That'd be
so
terrifying.
She's just looking down there hoping that doesn't happen. But unfortunately, right at this moment, the person walked to the base of her tent and came to a stop right outside where the opening to the tent is. And so she's sitting there thinking, please don't come in here, please don't come in here, please don't come in here. And even though her feet are pulled up into her tent, she suddenly feels
that picture.
She knows it's a hand. Something has grabbed my foot. And she stifles a scream and she starts shaking uncontrollably because her instincts are telling her, don't let this person know you're awake. And luckily, as she's sitting there shaking from fear and trying to be quiet as best as she can, she's holding her mouth. This person stands back up again and goes back to the spot next to her tent and leans over the tent once again, and she can hear them breathing right over her. And so for several minutes, she lay there shaking with this random person who pinched her foot a minute ago, hovering over her tent in the middle of the night. And she has nothing she can do. And she's just quiet. She's hoping it's going to end soon. And eventually this person would turn around and walk over to their cooler and their table and some other things that were out. And she hears some rummaging going on. Some things are being moved around. And then this person just kind of walks off into the distance. But she doesn't know if they're gone. She doesn't know if they're standing in the edge of the tree line waiting for her to come outside. Maybe they laid a trap for her. And so she just lays there, silent, doesn't move, and she's praying to herself, please don't let anything happen to me or my father. And all night she's just laying there. And then eventually she does fall asleep. Probably hours go by, but she does fall asleep because she wakes up again when she hears her father unzipping his tent, and she charges out to meet him.
Yep.
And she can tell right away that he's scared. And before she can even say or begin to describe what's happened to her, he says, were you outside your tent last night at about 2-3 in the morning? Because I heard all sorts of commotion near our cooler. I wasn't sure if it was an animal. I wasn't sure if it was you. And she starts telling him, no, this is what happened to me. And as she's describing what happened to her, he looks behind her at the picnic table, which was next to their cooler, and they had their backpacks on it. Basically, anything that didn't fit in their tents, they kept near this picnic table.
Hey, Rhea.
Points at it, and she turns around, and any item that was in the cooler or in their backpacks or that was just out has been stacked in a pyramid formation on this table. Clearly,
What?
the guy who was here last night did this for some reason they don't understand. And as they go over to look at it to see if anything's been taken, they notice this track of footprints, like these heavy footprints that have been going around and around Katie's tent. So she clearly wasn't imagining. So that instant, they packed everything up.
It's Mr. Ballen. If your teacher's playing anything like him, that's a good teacher.
Brought their car and they left. And to this day, they can barely talk about it with each other because it's all the things that could have happened. The father felt horribly
That's
guilty
very
because
weird.
He clearly heard
Very,
this
very
person,
weird.
but didn't leave his tent. And his daughter was clearly in danger. And his daughter's thinking, the tent was open. This person was crouching
Thank you, Murder. I
down,
appreciate it.
reaching into my tent, grabbing my feet. Like, that's such a horrifying image. And so this has been completely traumatizing for them.
I'm watching Mr. Ballen Top 3 Scariest Forest Stories. It was part of his Halloween Scare-a-thon. I think a couple of years ago. Might have been 2 years ago or last year. I'm not sure. Not sure. Then after this, I have a couple on deck, but I'm not sure which one I'm going to follow it with. But Mr. Ballen is a tremendous storyteller. Check him out on YouTube sometime.
Until present, a Canadian family has owned this very isolated cabin in the middle of the Ontario basin. It was the only property on this very small lake. There was two others across the lake, but they were pretty far away. And with the exception of the side of the cabin that was facing the water, the rest of it was surrounded by really dense forest that went on for quite a while. About 2 miles away from this cabin, on the other side of this dirt road, was this huge wildlife reserve that was pretty much just a huge forest that was protected. And anytime the family was visiting this cabin, the kids would at some point go into the reserve and go explore. In 2001, when the family was at the cabin, the kids were across the road over at the reserve, and they decided to walk down this particular trail that they hadn't seen before, and they just started walking. For about 30 minutes, they're seeing new areas they hadn't seen before. And then they come to this clearing, and there's all these abandoned houses. At first, there was a little debate about whether these were actually abandoned because they did look like they were in pretty good condition.
His green screen effects are wicked. I'd love to have some backgrounds like that, especially during sports broadcasts. Can you imagine having like some athletes in the background throwing the ball? That'd be pretty cool.
But when they walked a little bit closer, it became very clear that nature is reclaiming this land.
This is pretty tame in comparison to what he usually does.
Rusted out, and grass is growing all through them, and so they knew these were abandoned. They walked up to the first house they saw, and they looked in, and they couldn't believe what they were looking at. It was like whoever lived here had left without taking anything. The house was still totally furnished. In fact, their dining room tables still had plates and cups and forks and knives, like they had just had dinner and then just got up and left. They start talking about going into these houses and looking around.
Probably the three most vanilla stories I've heard him tell so far.
Is that why everything is in such good repair? Should we not go inside these houses? And they start looking around for any indication that definitely this is not a museum. These are just plain abandoned. And across the street from the house they were at was this totally decrepit looking house. Let's go over there and look in there. And so they look in a window, and very clearly the ceiling is totally sagging down. And the first floor is buckling completely, and there's clothes.
I can do a search of him real quick. Well, after there's only a few minutes left. I can check something out from him.
And shoes scattered everywhere.
So he sounds familiar.
That this is no museum. These are abandoned. We can totally go look around inside. And so for the next couple of hours, the kids explored all the houses that looked structurally sound, that weren't going to collapse on them. And it was just fascinating. There was all this stuff that was left behind that was fairly valuable. And they didn't take anything. They just thought it was very cool. And after a while, they decided they'd seen enough, and they turned around and headed back to their cabin. After they got back, they told their parents about what they found, and their father was like, man, that sounds awesome. I want to go check that out. And so that day, they went right back over to the abandoned houses. The first house they showed him was the really decrepit-looking one where the ceiling was sagging and there was women's shoes and clothes all over the ground to show him for sure these are abandoned, because we had some doubts at first too. These are definitely abandoned. So they look at that house, and then they went back to the very first house they saw when they walked into this complex, the one that was in great condition and had the dining table still set. So they go inside and they go upstairs and they find this bedroom that, like everything else in the house, is totally intact. You got pictures on the wall, it's fully furnished.
Wow.
There's even still sheets made on the bed, in the pillow. It's got a head imprint from whoever was there last. And at the foot of the bed is this beautiful fur coat. And the father walks over to it and he looks at it. He's like, this is real fur. This is a really expensive coat. I want to take this for our family. But before he took it, he had a hesitation. Is this really abandoned? You know, if someone had been here, they would have seen footprints all over the house just because there's grime all over the ground. And they can clearly see their footprints from where they've just come in. And he's like, no, this is just a weird situation. It's definitely abandoned and finders keepers. And so he picks up the jacket and he says, I'm going to give this to mom after I clean it up. And so with the jacket in hand, the father and the kids explore the rest of the house.
Yeah.
And when they go outside, they realize it's starting to get late and it's probably time to head back. And so they turn around and they start walking away from these houses towards their cabin. And they get about 50 or 60 meters away when one of the kids said he just had this weird sense that they were being watched. And so he turns around, shocked, when he sees there's an old woman standing in the bedroom that they had just been in, where the fur coat was. She's got a loose bun on the top of her head. She's got this blue shawl on her shoulders over a cream blouse, and she's glaring at them. When the kid saw this woman, he made an audible gasp, and the rest of them too saw this woman in the window.
Right, yeah.
And the feeling was guilt. They're like, oh my goodness, we just stole from this poor woman who lives in this abandoned house. And so right away, the whole group starts walking right back towards the house. They're going to give this jacket back. In fact, the dad is like, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have taken this. I'm sorry. And as they're walking back towards the property, the woman in the window who hasn't said anything just turns around and walks back into the main part of the house. They can't see her anymore. And so as they're walking closer to the house, they're assuming she's going to come downstairs to retrieve this jacket that they've taken from her. And so they get right up to the front door, and the father is yelling to her, I'm sorry, where do you want me to leave this jacket? I can bring it in to you. And they're kind of just waiting for her to come downstairs, and she doesn't.
Yep.
She's nowhere to be found.
He's right there.
Sound. She's not indicating what to do. And so after waiting for a couple of minutes, the kids don't really know what to do, and they're kind of getting uneasy about the situation. And the father is still very confident that he just wants to give this back and make amends.
Just set it down on the ground. Get the hell out of there.
He walks inside, tells his kid to stay here. I'm going to give it to her. And he goes inside and he disappears upstairs. And then all of a sudden, from across the street in that decrepit house with the caved-in ceiling, they hear one of the second floor windows come slamming down. And at the same time, their dad comes charging down the stairs, no jacket with him, and he's saying, go, go, go. And the kids are spooked from the window getting slammed. And they start running away until they're about 100 meters away from these houses. And they stop and they're panting and they're out of breath. And the kids ask their dad, what happened? And he says to them, I looked everywhere upstairs and I could not find that lady. I don't know where she is. Either she's hiding from us or something. But I happened to be looking out at that other house. Something caught my eye. There was movement. And I saw another person in the second floor of that building that's falling apart. And I watched them slam the window. And then as soon as I did, I heard someone yell, get out. And I ran out after you guys. Now, the kids and the dad are absolutely terrified. And they want to leave. But they also want one more look at these buildings before they do. And when they had run away, they had stopped behind this big group of trees that obscured their view to the buildings. They were out of sight. And so they begin to peek their heads around the tree.
Get the hell out of there.
The building, and they can't believe what they see. Standing in the window of the fur coat room is not only the old woman, but also a very tall man who's holding her shoulders and is bending down because his head is too high to look standing. He's crouched down, he's looking out the window next to her, and they're both glaring towards them. The father and his kids are practically falling over themselves to sprint away and back to their cabin. To this day,
I don't know about that one.
No idea who those people were. What
you don't stop and take one last look. You just get the hell out of there.
Around without making any noise and consistently hide from them and not leave any footprints. It was all very strange and terrifying stuff. And then the government ended up demolishing those houses almost immediately after they were there. And so they'll never get any answers because everything's gone. So that's going to do it, guys. Let me know in the comments what you thought of their stories, and I will get your best comment.
Give him a like, give him a sub. He's a good storyteller. These were very, very vanilla, though. I will give you that. Very, very vanilla. I've heard of Mr. Ballen. No, not Mr. Ballen, Mr. Nightmare. Oh, he does a very similar thing to Mr. Ballen. Yeah, very similar thing. Yeah, he does the same sort of thing. Six really creepy, unexplained mysteries. Four true Christmas time horror stories. Ten disturbing, believable. Not sure, but for me it's different. I think Mr. Nightmare's voice definitely makes these videos. Yeah, yeah. Ten disturbing, believable paranormal clips. Hmm. I don't know. Ooh, sleep paralysis horror stories. Yes. Hopefully he won't mind me doing a reaction. So if my feed gets cut off, you know why.
Has anyone ever had sleep paralysis before? I tell you, it's one of the strangest, most
I've had sleep paralysis twice. Um, Fortunately for me, when I did kind of wake up, my eyes were closed and I couldn't really open them. Um, once. Um, oh, use of this with that expression is not allowed and will be pursued as necessary. Reupload videos. Ah, use of this narration audio for any projects including animation without express permission is not allowed and will be pursued if necessary. Re-uploading any of these videos will be acted upon. Okay, so definitely not gonna react to that. Not gonna take a chance. Yeah, Mr. Nightmare. You know, um, maybe he's had his audio stolen before. Um, but well, not most, but a lot of channels don't mind. My immediate reaction, um, is that he's a bit full of himself, but I don't know the whole story behind it. So, whoops. A secret was hiding in plain sight. She ignored the warning siren. Still by the serial killer's house. Let's go to Mr. Ballen. Look at his videos, playlists. Scared for their fans, medical, final message, claustrophobia, strangers in fiction, unsolvable mysteries, spooky stories, survival stories, solved mysteries, strange, Halloween, creepy audio, disturbing videos, crime, military, disturbing photos, missing 411's pretty interesting. I love these missing 411's. Very, very fascinating. I think you can react to them. Still, I've seen people react to them. Yeah, I don't. If I were doing a record, then I would. But it being live, I don't want the feed in and have to re-upload everything and restart. Um. So yeah, I just won't chance it.
Every year, hundreds of people go missing inside of national parks and
Yeah. This missing 411 is a fascinating series. There are books. I believe there's even a documentary. It's a very, very fascinating deep dive into people who go missing in forests and stuff. There are a lot of unusual cases, and I've watched quite a few of them already. And there's a fair few that have a link to them, and it makes me wonder. Like something very specific is going on, but what that very specific thing is gets me. I don't know what it is, but it's wild. Yeah, man, 100%. And the way these people, I don't know if you watched the missing 411 on YouTube, but the way they go missing, the circumstances, where they end up, where they're found, if and when they are found, bizarre, completely bizarre.
forests all over North America. Every year, hundreds of people go missing inside of national parks and forests all over North America. Of those hundreds, there's always a few that baffle investigators because either they go missing under very strange circumstances, like they were right in front of someone, they were talking to someone, and then, in a second they're gone, or where they're discovered doesn't make any sense, that they've covered a distance that is too far for them to have covered,
Yeah.
or they're in locations that are just physically impossible to get to. One man is making it his mission to research these very strange disappearances. His name is David Politis. He's a former police detective. He covers all of these cases in his book series called Missing 411. I went out and bought all of them. They're incredible. He has a YouTube channel called the Can-Am Missing Project. That's linked below in the description. And
Definitely
so
give it
today
a
I'm going to share 3
fascinating.
missing person cases that have all been covered by David Politis in Missing 411. And hopefully by the end of this video, you're just as interested in the Missing 411 phenomenon that David Politis has brought to light. And hopefully you'll go over to his channel, the Can-Am Missing Project, and you'll give them a follow because he has poured tens of thousands of hours into this. Without David Politis, there would be no Missing 411 project, and many people that go missing would just be forgotten about. So shout out to David Politis for keeping their memories alive and keeping the public engaged in something that is truly baffling and needs more attention. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel because that's all I do, and I upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. If that's of interest to you, then please sneak into the like button's house and replace all of their salt shakers with sugar. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Replacing the sugar shakers with the salt would be funnier. Meaner, for sure.
So just a couple of weeks ago, early on July 24th, 2020, an 18-year-old woman named Gia Fuda, who was living with her parents in Seattle, Washington, wakes up in their home, goes downstairs, says good morning to her mother and to her father. She has a sip of a seltzer water, and then she heads out to her car and says, okay, I'll see you tonight, and she drives off. Gia's mother said that because of the quarantine, all of Gia's college classes had been moved online, and Gia didn't like doing all of her work in the house. She felt trapped. And so her routine consisted of getting up early and heading to Bellevue College, which is just outside of Seattle, where she could do some work in their library, do her online courses there, and then come back sometime in the evening. And so Gia's parents assumed that's what she was doing that day. But when Gia left that morning, she did not follow her typical COVID-19 routine of going to Bellevue College to do schoolwork. Instead, she hopped on the highway and she drove 60 miles to a very rural part of Washington State. It's very heavily forested. It's called Index, Washington. And she gets picked up on a camera inside of a coffee shop where she gets a cup of coffee and she buys a Bigfoot keychain and then gets back in her car and drives another 30 miles away from Seattle, away from her parents' home. It's unclear where she's going until her car runs out of gas. And when she ran out of gas, it was like she wasn't prepared for it because she was only able to turn her car and barely pull off of Highway 2. It didn't look like she'd intentionally parked. And it's actually how investigators spotted it because it was jutting out into the road slightly. She gets out, and instead of walking on the highway to try to get help or trying to flag down another motorist, she grabs her cell phone, her Bible, and a journal and turns and starts walking directly uphill. There's like this mountain right next to the highway, and it's very densely forested. And she just starts walking straight.
I don't know if she's the sort to take her Bible with her everywhere. There are people like that, but it makes me wonder if that is a typical part of her routine. If it isn't, then she's going through something and she needs help with it.
Up this mountain. It's important to note that David Politis just recently came out with a video about this case on his Can-Am Missing Project channel, and he says that the area she stopped in is an area where at least a dozen other people have gone missing under baffling circumstances that have all been covered in the Missing 411 phenomenon. By 11:30 that night, Gia's parents were starting to get very concerned that they hadn't heard from their daughter and that she hadn't come home yet. They started texting her and calling her. No answer, no response. By 1 a.m., they called the police. So this huge search is launched to go find Gia. Hundreds of volunteers. They have all these professional search and rescue people out there. They have helicopters overhead, and almost immediately, within a few hours of the search being launched, they find her car on Highway 2. But no sign of her anywhere. The area that she was in was actually a dead zone for cell phone service, so they couldn't get in touch with her, in part because they had no service. And authorities weren't able to track her phone because there was no cell phone reception. So they didn't have much to work with, except that they generally knew where she might be, which is in this very thick section of the Cascade Mountains. And so for days and days, they're searching and turning up nothing. And unfortunately, as time ticks on, the likelihood of her being found alive is next to zero. But 7 days into this huge search where nothing has been turned up, they have this huge find. A couple of the searchers that were miles away from where she had gone missing. I mean, at this point, you're 7 days into the search. You have searchers combing miles and miles of territory, and there's nothing. They found nothing. And these searchers are up near this scenic creek, where there's a little bit of a clearing, there's this creek, and they find in one area her jacket, her shoes, her phone, her journal, and her Bible, all in one area. It looked like she had just suddenly stripped everything she had, put it on the ground, but she was nowhere to be found. So while this find is certainly great progress towards discovering what happened, it unfortunately sent a message to her parents that at this point, you need to brace for the worst, because now your daughter is not only missing and has been for a week, she doesn't have any gear. She has no clothes, she has no phone, she's just gone and has nothing.
That's bizarre.
The omen was very bad at this point. But her family and the searchers were not willing to give up, so they continued to search this new area where all of her stuff had been found for another 2 days. And on the 9th day from when she had gone missing, they found her. She was alive. She was sitting on a rock near this creek. When they approached her, she was very startled to see people coming near her. She clearly was not expecting to be found. She was also more or less incoherent. She believed she had only been out for maybe 3 days and just had gotten lost.
That is just a little bit ago when I talked to you, when I told you about these weird disappearances and how they have links. That what you just heard is a couple of them. They have these weird breaks from their like typical day to day, and then when you find them, they're startled to be found. They don't know really how long they've been missing. There was a guy in one that I watched. He was gone. Hey, Flame. He was gone for like a week. And he only thought 2 days had passed. 2 or 3 days, something like that. And he had gotten a haircut. He had gotten a phone. He had no idea how he didn't have any money on him. So how did he buy the phone? He doesn't know how he bought it. He doesn't know how he got it, but it had his wife's number in it. And he didn't remember getting a haircut. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. There are these handfuls of disappearances that have these weird links to them, and this young woman is one of them. It's bizarre.
But they told her she had been gone for 9 days.
Bizarre.
But she was unhurt. She had a couple scratches on her. She was definitely emaciated.
And it's not like, she can't tell when the sun comes up, the sun goes down. She's in the forest. It can be very, very dense and hard to tell, sure. But yeah, it's that weird.
But she had been drinking from the stream and eating huckleberries. So she was, taking care of herself, but she was totally confused. She didn't know why she was there. And when she was pressed a little bit further, she didn't know why she drove where she drove. She doesn't know why she walked up a very steep mountain into the Cascades. She also has no idea what happened over the first 6-7 days. She only recalled the last couple and thought that's the whole time she'd been out there. So it's a very confusing story, and one that probably we will never get a clear answer to. This will just become another.
There are dozens of stories like that. Dozens. It's bizarre. People want to point immediately to aliens and stuff, but I mean, I think that's taken a little too far. Something's going on, though. Something's going on.
One of the thousands of very odd disappearances that occur all over North America. Except at least in this case, she was found alive.
Usually they aren't. Usually they find a couple bones and some teeth.
Tom Mezek was the salty Army veteran. He had served in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is an elite paratrooper division. He taught survival training classes, but more than anything, he loved to hunt. And he actually hunted in this one particular area in New York all the time. with the same group of friends. In fact, for like 55 years, Tom and his 6 hunter friends would hunt this one area. On November 15th, 2015, Tom and his hunting buddies decide to go hunt in this area. And they got a bit of a late start. They didn't get out there till about noon. So they decided, in order to make up for lost time, to use this technique that's referred to as a deer drive, where you have stationary watchers that set up on a line about 100 meters apart from one another, and you have a group of drivers that kind of corral any deer or any animals in the area and push them so that they go past the watchers who can take a shot at the animal. And so Tom, along with 3 other hunters, were made watchers, and they set up along this hillside where Tom was all the way on the left flank, which meant on his left were no hunters. He did have a hunter 100 meters to his right, and then there was 2 other hunters all the way up the hill on the right as well, but he was on the outer flank of that line. And the 3 other hunters that were going to be doing the driving were to his right as well. Behind this hill, they were going to try to push the deer up and over this hill down to this line of watchers. After 3 hours and no luck, they haven't seen one deer. They start to also comment on the fact that there doesn't seem to be any wildlife at all. No squirrels, no birds, no anything. There's just silence, which is very odd for this area. And when you consider that this group has hunted this area for 55 years, they have a really good understanding of what normal looks like. And before anything happened with Tom, they were already talking about how strange that was. Also, one of the watchers who was right next to where Tom was, about 100 meters away, he recalled hearing a very distinct sound, like a whooshing sound or a snapping sound, coming generally from where Tom was. But he didn't think much of it at the time. That is, until they got back to their cars after calling off the hunt because they had been unsuccessful. And everyone's there except for Tom. And they go back out, they're yelling for Tom, they're wondering, did he fall down?
Where'd Tom go?
Okay, let's radio him, because everybody had radios. There's no answer from Tom. They're searching the area where he was. They start shooting their rifles into the air. They can't find him. And they think, okay, well, we don't know what he's doing, but this guy is super competent. He was healthy. Let's just go to the cars and wait for him. And so they're sitting at the parking lot, which is not very far from where they were hunting. And this is an area they always parked in, and this is an area they always hunted in. So they knew that Tom knows where they're going to be. And so they sat there waiting, and he's just not showing up. So eventually, the hunters call it in to the rangers that he's gone missing. A massive search is launched for Tom. I mean, they are combing this area. They got helicopters, professional search teams. They're looking in lakes. They're looking under logs. They're looking everywhere. And there's not a shred of evidence of Tom.
Just up and
They can't find his walkie-talkie. They can't find his gun. There's no clothes. There's nothing. It just disappeared. On the 4th day of the search, the FBI shows up, and they get involved in the search, which didn't make any sense, because why is the FBI getting involved 4 days into a search for an elderly hunter?
Why?
Where there's no sign
Makes
of
you wonder.
play? Why are they getting involved? It didn't really add up. And all they would tell Tom's wife is that they believed that something was off about this case, and that's why they were there. But they couldn't elaborate unless more information came in. But nothing ever shows up. Even though Tom was a bit older, he literally taught survival classes. He was the guy teaching other people how to survive in the woods. He also has been hunting in that particular area for 55 years. How is it that he in no way was able to signal that something was wrong, and that all these people, including the FBI, can't find any trace of him? It just seems like something is off. I've got to agree with the FBI on this one.
Vanish into thin air, and the FBI show up early doors saying something is off. Makes you wonder.
In 2013, 51-year-old Dale Stelling decided to take a trip from Texas, where he lived with his wife and his parents, up to Colorado. He was an avid outdoorsman, and he had always wanted to go hiking and camping in Colorado. So he, his wife, and his parents load up the RV, and they start making their way up to Colorado. On June 9th, as they're making their way to Colorado, their RV breaks down in New Mexico. Even though they were eager to get to Colorado, Dale saw that where they had broken down was near the Mesa Verde National Park. And he thought, well, we weren't planning this, but let's just stay here for a night and go check out the park tomorrow. Then we'll get the RV fixed, and we'll be on our way to Colorado.
Gorgeous.
So they all agree. They stay the night, and the next morning they head over to Mesa Verde National Park. It was a very hot day that day, and Dale's wife was overweight and not very healthy, and his parents were very elderly. So when I got to the park, they ended up just sitting at the visitor center, and no one really wanted to actually go walk around. But Dale was an avid hiker, and he didn't like the idea of just sitting around all day. And so at some point, Dale just says, "Hey, I'm going to go stretch my legs and walk this trail here down to the abandoned city ruins." There was this city that had been built into the cliff that lots of tourists
Gotta check that out. It's gorgeous.
So his wife and his parents, they don't bat an eye. They say,
TV.
"Okay, we'll see you in a little bit." And Dale was off. Dale made it seem like it was going to be a very quick trip. And so when he didn't return in 2 hours, his family decided to tell rangers and say, "Hey, our husband, our son, he went hiking down that trail there towards the ruins, and we haven't heard from him. We can't get in touch with him on the phone. Can you guys go look for him?" The Rangers actually were not concerned at all.
No.
They said that we've never had anybody go missing for more than a few hours here. It's pretty hard to get lost. There's lots of tourists here, well-marked trails. Just give it a couple more hours. If he doesn't show up, then we'll go out and look for him. But after about an hour, and they still hadn't seen him, his family really pressed the issue with the Rangers, and they would go looking for Dale. And of course, they can't find him. But they found a number of tourists that had seen him on the trail that he said he was going to be on. They had even talked to him. He was a very energetic, charismatic guy, and they would say that he seemed like he was just another tourist enjoying his time at the park. There's nothing odd about his behavior at all. And he was walking towards the area where he had told his family he was going. While that information was certainly useful, they still couldn't find Dale.
Yeah.
And they were really fighting against the elements on this one. The temperatures were over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and had been all day, and Dale didn't have any water. So they really had a limited amount of time to find him. So within 24 hours, there's this huge search that's launched for Dale. And interestingly, in the first 24 hours of the search, a woman was at the park and was walking along the trail that Dale was on. And she remembers hearing a weak male voice yelling for help. And so she kind of looked over the edge. She couldn't see down below her. She was on a bit of a cliff, fearing that if she went to look, she might fall and become a victim. She went back to the Rangers and said, "Hey, here's the area I was in. I heard someone yelling for help. You should go check it out." And the Rangers said that actually we've been getting that report. We got that report yesterday. But when we went to look in that area, we can't find anything. There's no one over there.
Wow.
So while it seems very likely that that person calling for help was most likely Dale, we don't know for sure because they were never able to locate who was asking for help. And to this day, we have no idea where Dale is. There's been no shred of evidence to indicate where he went. He just vanished. If you enjoyed today's story, if you haven't already...
So it's a cliff. They've been down there, and obviously it's not a cave. Weird. That's creepy. Creepy. Oh, man. Creepy. That is bizarre. Bizarre. Well, according to Kit Kat, I don't know if it's reliable. Steeling's remains were found 4.2 miles from where he was last seen. Well, sorry, but I don't consider that verification. It being a cave, though, not a cave, but a cliff. Could the echo have been throwing the park rangers off? Could they have just looked in the wrong place and been literally just walking right past them? It's certainly possible. Yeah, I've been at it since about 6:40ish, so I think I'm gonna call it a day. I got an early start at this. Yeah, I think I'm gonna call it a day. This was fun. This was a good time. I will be live again Thursday for Chiefs Broncos. It's gonna be an excruciating game. Painful to watch, painful to call. I have zero faith that the Colts will pull it out. But maybe they'll do what they did with the Chiefs and pull off an upset. So, anyways, thank you guys for humoring me. I look forward to next Tuesday. Very much look forward to reacting to some new stuff. I'm going to go in a different direction. I'll have some other things other than Mr. Ballen. I'll have some ghost stuff, some spooky stuff. It is October. Halloween is speeding close, speeding towards us. So yeah, I'll find some stuff to match the spooky season that's upon us. So peace out. I'll catch you Thursday.